Now, in one of your videos, you said that God is, or actually not in your video, in a text response, when I asked you about this, you said God is the criterion for reality.
Right.
You're trying to give me more pointed questions of asking, what do you mean by this?
Okay.
I'll ask, which reality are you referring to? In the sense that,
Go ahead.
because you believe that there are two realities. Material reality, be
Right.
understood through empirical observation and study, and then and the immaterial reality, which cannot be studied by empirical methods, but can be understood through logic, correct?
Right, that sounds pretty good.
So, which reality is he the criterion for?
Well, he's the criterion for the physical reality, in that the physical reality is lawful on the basis of immaterial laws. That makes sense?
Not entirely, because...
Good. We have plenty to talk about then. Continue.
Because based on how you conceive of God, which is
Right.
not mainstream or anything anyone's familiar with, he's not necessarily bound by these laws himself, correct?
The physical laws?
Yes.
No, certainly not. God, in the notion I talk about, has to be understood in terms of omnipotence. And so any adherence to law would be violating the idea of omnipotence. So, right.
Okay. So, how does that make him the criterion for physical reality? Now he's the creator of physical reality, that's fine, but that's something altogether different than the criterion, physical reality.
Okay. Well, tell me what you think a criterion is, then. And I'll base my answer off of that.
Okay. Hopefully this example will work. Now, do you watch tennis?
I do.
So you know who Roger Federer is?
I don't. I watch a little bit of tennis.
Okay. Roger Federer is the number one tennis player, number one ranked.
Oh, right on. Okay.
So it's safe to say that he sets the criterion for a top tennis player. But he did not create tennis, nor was he the main cause of tennis. In fact, he came in 100 years after the fact of tennis. So I'm not really... So basically,
I gotcha.
that's
Okay.
criterion.
I gotcha. Okay, so it's like the standard. He set the bar, or she set the bar. He or she? He.
Roger,
he set the bar for what is good and what has to be beat. So if you want to use that sort of idea in terms of God...
and can I add one more thing?
Of course.
He also didn't develop the rules of tennis. He's bound by them. Yet, he's
precisely.
criterion for tennis.
All right. I would agree that he's a criterion for a person's performance in tennis. But but unless he wrote the rules, to say that he was a criterion for tennis itself might be a little misleading. That being said,
Okay,
though,
true.
I still think we could use that idea to talk about to talk more on this subject of what God is and his role in the universe. And that is, in saying that God is the criterion for things, I recognize that there is
Or physical things, to make things clear.
Right. I understand it in terms of the immaterial world as being an infinite bank of ideas, of possibilities. When you talk about omnipotence, you talk about limitless possibilities. There's nothing that would inhibit in any way the manifestation from the ideal world, which is where God inhabits, to the physical world, which I would propose is that subservient or that the subjective
where we
reality.
are inhabited.
Right. In that, then, the criterion is the selection from that universal or infinite bank of ideas in the manifestation of the real world, the material world, precisely as it is. As there are other conceivable possibilities for this physical world, those possibilities that are are separate and distinct from those that are not. And in that distinction is some sort of criteria. And that criterion is what I call as God. And that's a facet of God, as I argue it anyway. To say then that he's the creator is to say that he has access to this infinite potentiality, and that he can maintain any selection, any finite selection of this infinite potentiality, and to do this on a basis that is superior to the physical reality that is governed by these selections, if you will.
Okay, I have one small concern. Since you seem kind of vague on like what he chose to go with in terms of making this physical world, and you bring up the idea of other possibilities, you come dangerously close. I wouldn't say you are doing this, but close enough to begging the question of why exactly these types of physical laws, why not other types of physical laws? There's a possibility that there's even a criterion beyond God that determines what physical laws he can even create.
Precisely. That's a good point. And so the only way we can understand it then is to think of God as creating, or as the creator of the universe for no reason. The difficulty really, and Christians suffer from this as well as all theists do, is this point, and I do want to be transparent with this, is that if there does exist a creator God, then his creation of the universe might have resulted from a necessity. Or what you were hinting at is some kind of criteria. There wasn't something being met, and that he needed to meet, or it needed to meet, in creating the physical world. Problem with that, though, is if God creates in a state of need, then it ceases to be God, right? It's the only reason you have need is because of some limitation. You need to eat because, or whatever.
Ceases to be an omnipotent God. It could still be a creator
precisely.
God. A creator God is something you could say, okay, therefore an omnipotent. Or a creator God could just create and nothing else.
That could be. So then to draw this back to your question, jog my memory real quick. We're talking about, what was it?
Criterion, physical reality.
Right.
I think we moved on to God's criterion, and then you started.
Okay, right. God's criterion. If God is truly free and omnipotent, and his creating the universe was free and omnipotent, then there cannot be a criterion for God's creation. It's the understanding of what truly a free will would be, uninhibited and yet not random. It becomes this entity unto itself, this sort of self-efficating, this sort of self-manifesting thing. It's the epitome of the idea of the unmoved mover. Aristotle's idea of the first cause is that this thing is distinctly different from the rest in that it creates things from literally nothing. And in that, then, the necessity for a criterion in which God would select what realities to manifest in the physical world and which to not becomes not a necessity, in that we understand that God is omnipotent. If God is not omnipotent, it ceases to be God in a concept that I would argue. But in that way, you could say that there is some sort of criterion that the creator is subject to, but then you have to ask what created, or what is that criterion that even God is subject to. And you're right in saying that would become more godly than the creator himself.